The glass of grape juice flew straight toward me. For a second, it was like time froze, the deep purple liquid spinning in the air, catching the light, before it crashed into my white dress. The color spread fast, blooming across the fabric like a wound. A stain of shame, alive for everyone to see. I didn't even move at first. My hands just hung there, useless in my lap. Skylar, my 8-year-old granddaughter, stood a few feet away, clutching the empty glass, her lips curving into a small, triumphant smile. That smile hit me harder than the juice. Because it wasn't a child's accident. It was intention. The silence lasted maybe 2 seconds before laughter filled the room. Real laughter. Loud, carefree, cruel. Skylar, you are terrible, my daughter-in-law, Tanisha, shrieked between giggles. She clapped her hands like it was the best joke of the night. My son, Marcus, tried to cover his mouth, but I saw his shoulders shaking with amusement. The other guests joined in, people I barely knew, pointing at my ruined dress like I was some sideshow attraction. And then Skylar said it. Her little voice sweet and sharp all at once. Mommy said you don't belong here. The room didn't go quiet. No one gasped. No one corrected her. They just kept laughing. Tanisha didn't even flinch. She just kept cutting slices of birthday cake, smiling proudly like her daughter had recited a poem. I sat there, the fabric sticking to my skin, feeling the wet cold against my stomach. I had spent a week saving for that dress, $150 I didn't have, because I'd hoped, foolishly, that this time might be different. That maybe, after all the years of being ignored, they'd treat me like family again. How stupid I was. My hands trembled as I stood up. I told myself to breathe, to stay calm, to keep my dignity intact. I wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not in front of all these people who'd go home later and laugh about the old lady who got grape bombed at her own son's party. Skylar tilted her head, pretending innocence. Aren't you gonna say anything, Grandma? I looked right at her, into those small, mocking eyes that didn't belong to her. They belonged to the adults who'd taught her cruelty. No, sweetie, I said softly, my voice steadier than I expected. I don't have anything to say. I turned and walked toward the kitchen, my heels sticking to the tile from the spilled juice. Behind me, the laughter started again. Someone turned the music up louder, like they needed a soundtrack for my humiliation. In the kitchen, I grabbed a towel and tried to clean myself. The purple stain only spread. I rubbed harder until my hands began to ache. But I knew it wasn't about the dress anymore. The damage was deeper than that. It was the same damage that had been happening in smaller ways for years, the dismissive looks, the forgotten calls, the polite indifference. I had believed every lie I told myself to survive. That maybe I was too sensitive. Too needy. Too old to fit into their modern lives. But tonight, standing there with a ruined dress and a bruised heart, I finally saw it clearly. They didn't want me there. They never had. I wasn't family. I was obligation. A shadow they endured because decency demanded it. I could hear the muffled thump of the bass through the wall, Tanisha's laughter cutting through it all. I imagined her telling the story later, you should have seen S's face. And the whole table laughing with her. I dropped the towel on the counter. My reflection in the microwave door looked unfamiliar, the tight jaw, the tired eyes, the woman holding herself together out of habit. Enough. I took my purse and keys. No one noticed when I walked through the hallway. No one called out as I opened the door. I stepped outside into the quiet night, the air cool against my skin. For a moment I just stood there on the porch, listening to the sound of my family celebrating inside without me. Then I walked to my car, each step heavy but sure. When I slid into the driver's seat, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't broken. Her eyes were dry, her lips firm, her expression clear. It wasn't sadness trembling in my hands anymore. It was something sharper. Stronger. Determination. That was the word. Pure, cold determination, the kind that forms after years of silence and humiliation finally break. I turned the key, the engine coughing to life. As the house faded in the mirror, I didn't feel regret. I felt awake. For the first time in years, truly awake. That night, I didn't cry. Not a single tear left my eyes. I sat in my small apartment's living room, still wearing the ruined dress, the purple stains turning dark under the dim light. It was strange. I had spent my whole life crying over smaller things, yet this time, when everything truly broke, I felt nothing. It wasn't numbness. It was clarity. I brewed myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window, watching the quiet street below. A cat crossed the road, slow and careful, while a man in a hoodie walked his dog past the corner store. Ordinary life. Peaceful life. The kind of life that had always seemed so far away from mine. Because for years, my life had revolved around one thing, them. Marcus, Tanisha, and little Skylar. My family. My reason for everything. My cross to carry. I closed my eyes, and the memories came flooding back like an old movie reel. The first time Marcus asked me for money, I was 58, newly widowed, still waking up in the middle of the night expecting to hear Robert's soft snore beside me. We'd been married 34 years, when his heart gave out one quiet April morning while trimming the roses. I still remember the smell of the grass, the hum of the mower, the way his coffee mug sat half full on the porch table. The weeks after the funeral were a blur of casseroles, sympathy cards, and loneliness. Marcus visited 3 times, once to help with the paperwork, once to bring Skylar, and once when he needed $5,000. "Mom," he'd said, voice soft, eyes red. "It's temporary. I swear I'll pay you back in 2 months." He looked so much like his father in that moment, the same pleading eyes, the same earnest tone, that I didn't hesitate. That money came from Robert's insurance, the little cushion we'd saved to fix the leaky roof and replace the drafty windows. I wrote the check with shaky hands, believing I was helping my son through a rough patch. 2 months became 6. Then a year. When I finally asked about it, Marcus got defensive. "Seriously, Mom? You're gonna guilt me about money? After everything that's happened? I thought you wanted to help your family." That sentence stung. I thought you wanted to help your family. It became a weapon, one he would use again and again whenever I hesitated. The next year, he needed $3,000 for a credit card debt. Then $2,000 for a car repair. Then $100 just until payday. I kept telling myself it was fine. That good mothers helped their children no matter what. That one day, when things got better, he'd remember how I'd been there. But gratitude never came. What came instead was expectation. By the time he asked me to co-sign for their first house, I was already conditioned to say yes. Tanisha had come over with her best smile and a folder of papers. "Essie, it's just a formality," she'd said, her hand resting on mine. "You won't have to pay a dime. We just need your name, so the bank approves the loan." I remember dressing up for that meeting at the bank, the same black suit I'd worn to Robert's funeral. I didn't understand half the terms the loan officer explained, but Marcus and Tanisha nodded along like they did. "Just sign here, Mom. Trust us." So I signed. Because that's what love meant to me, trust, even when it hurt. For 2 years, everything seemed fine. They made their payments, hosted barbecues, posted smiling pictures in front of the house I'd helped them get. I felt proud every time I saw those photos. That's my son, I'd whisper to myself. That's my family. Then came the phone call. "Miss Dree," said the cold voice from the bank, "the payments for the property on Elmwood Avenue are 3 months past due. If they are not brought current, we'll proceed with foreclosure." I froze. Not because of the money, but because it was me the bank called, not them. When I confronted Marcus, he exploded. "Do you think I wanted this to happen? I lost my job, Mom. You think I'm some kind of criminal?" Tanisha stood behind him, arms crossed, lips tight. Skylar was there too, clinging to her mother's leg, eyes wide. I didn't want to argue in front of the child, so I left quietly, promising to figure something out. That night, I emptied my savings account, $8,000. It was all I had. I paid the overdue balance to save their house, to protect the loan I'd stupidly attached my name to. Marcus mumbled a thank you. Tanisha didn't even look at me. And the cycle began again. Every late payment brought another phone call. Every call brought another panic attack. I started working nights cleaning offices, just to cover what they couldn't. My hands cracked from chemicals, my back screamed every morning, but I kept going. Because I told myself it was what mothers did. What I didn't realize then was that love, when one-sided, becomes servitude. And servitude wears you down until you forget you ever had a choice. When they decided to remodel the kitchen, I was already too tired to argue. "It's an investment," Marcus said. "It'll increase the property value." They wanted $4,000. I gave them $6,000. I told myself it was a gift, not a burden. 6 months later, I saw the pictures on Facebook, the new cabinets, the granite countertops, the smiling faces of 30 guests celebrating in my kitchen. I wasn't invited. That was the first time something inside me cracked. I remember sitting on my bed that night, staring at the glowing phone screen, scrolling through photo after photo of people toasting wine glasses under the lights I'd paid for. Tanisha's caption read, "New beginnings, new memories." Not a single mention of me. When I called Marcus to ask why I hadn't been invited, he sighed. "We didn't think you'd be comfortable, Mom. You don't like crowds." It was such a small lie, but it told me everything. My presence didn't fit the image they wanted to project, the perfect young family with the perfect life. The old mother didn't match the aesthetic. That night, for the first time, I whispered aloud the thought that had been haunting me for years. Maybe they only keep me around for what I can give. But even then, I wasn't ready to face the truth. I kept visiting every Sunday. I kept bringing food no one ate. I kept showing up to Skylar's school plays, sitting in the back row with flowers I couldn't afford, pretending I didn't notice when they took family photos without me. Love can make you blind. But fear of being truly alone, can make you stay blind. As I sat in my apartment that night, the quiet hum of the fridge in the background, I realized how long I had mistaken silence for peace. How long I'd equated being needed with being loved. I sipped the last of my cold tea and looked at the clock. 1:47 a.m. Somewhere in the city, my family was probably asleep, dreaming peacefully while I replayed every moment of my humiliation. But under that pain, something new was stirring, a slow, deliberate burn that felt dangerously close to freedom. They had taken my money. They had taken my dignity. But tomorrow, I would start taking something back. I didn't know how yet. But I knew one thing for certain. They would never laugh at me again. The morning after that sleepless night, I woke up before sunrise. The sky was a pale gray, and for a few seconds, I didn't remember who I was or what day it was. Then the memories rushed in, the laughter, the juice, the stain, the silence. My chest tightened. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited for my heart to calm down. I wasn't sure if I was angry or simply exhausted. Maybe both. For years, I'd been walking on eggshells around the people I loved most, convincing myself that one more kind gesture, one more sacrifice, would finally make them see me. But love given without respect is just slow poison. And I had been swallowing it for years. The phone buzzed on my nightstand. A message from Marcus. "Morning, Mom. Hope you got home safe. Skylar didn't mean it last night. She's just a kid." I stared at the screen for a long time. No apology. No acknowledgement of the humiliation. Just excuses wrapped in politeness. I typed and deleted 3 different replies before setting the phone down. There was nothing left to say. I went to work that day, the small office where I handled payroll and scheduling for a cleaning company. I'd been there 8 years, part-time, but it kept me afloat. The younger staff called me Miss Essie, like I was their aunt. I liked that. They didn't know much about my life, and I preferred it that way. At lunch, while eating a sandwich alone at my desk, I caught myself thinking about Skylar's 7th birthday, the one that had hurt more than any other. That day was supposed to be special. I had spent months saving to buy her something meaningful, a beautiful equestrian dollhouse with little horses and real leather saddles. It had cost $300, but I didn't care. Skylar loved horses. I wanted to see her eyes light up. I stayed up late wrapping every tiny piece, tying pink ribbons around the boxes. When I arrived at the party, I was carrying so many packages, I could barely open the door. Tanisha greeted me with that perfect smile that never reached her eyes. "Essie. You made it. You can put your gifts over there." There was a lonely little table in the corner, away from the mountain of presents in the center of the room. I remember how my chest tightened, but I told myself not to take it personally. The party was full of strangers, parents from Skylar's school, people Tanisha wanted to impress. Marcus was busy grilling outside, laughing with the men. I sat quietly, watching my granddaughter run around in a princess dress, thinking how much she looked like her father when he was small. When it was time to open gifts, my presents were saved for last, almost as an afterthought. Skylar opened the other ones first, a bike, a tablet, designer clothes, a giant stuffed unicorn. Everyone clapped and cheered. Then she turned toward my pile of carefully wrapped boxes. She opened the first one with little enthusiasm. "How pretty, Grandma," she said in that polite, practiced tone kids use when they've been told to be nice. She didn't even realize the boxes were all part of one set. The dollhouse, I had envisioned as a magical experience, became a pile of random little toys no one cared about. "Can I go play with my new bike?" she asked before unwrapping the last one. "Of course, baby," Tanisha said, smiling proudly. And just like that, the children ran outside, leaving my gifts scattered on the table, ribbons and paper hanging off the edges like discarded trash. I stayed in my chair, frozen. I could hear the laughter from the backyard, the sound of the bike wheels spinning on the pavement. Inside, my dollhouse, my heart, lay in pieces. Marcus came over eventually, holding a beer. "Mom, you didn't have to spend so much money," he said in that tone that sounded like kindness, but felt like condescension. "Next time, just give us cash. It's more practical." Something inside me cracked then. It wasn't just disappointment, it was realization. To him, to all of them, I wasn't a person anymore. I was a wallet with a pulse. That night, I cried harder than I had since Robert's funeral. Not because of the money, but because I finally understood the truth I'd been running from. I wasn't loved. I was used. After that, things only got worse. The requests came more often, and the amounts grew larger. Skylar needs piano lessons. The car broke down again. The air conditioner stopped working. Can you help just this one last time, Mom? Each time I said yes, and each time, a little more of me disappeared. The last straw came with the vacation. Tanisha called one afternoon, her voice syrupy sweet. Essie, we're planning a trip to the Bahamas. Skylar's never been to the beach, and all her friends are going with their families. We don't want her to feel left out. I already knew what was coming. How much? I asked quietly. Only $2,500, she said quickly, like ripping off a bandage. It's just for the package, flights, hotel, meals. We'll handle the rest. She was lying, of course. They never handled the rest. I didn't have that kind of money, not without emptying my emergency fund completely. But then she said it, the same line that always broke me. We just don't want Skylar to feel excluded. The thought of my granddaughter sitting alone while her friends talked about their vacations was unbearable. So, I said yes. I worked double shifts for 3 months to make it happen. My knees swelled, my back screamed, but I did it. And when the time came, they packed their bags and left without me. I didn't even get a postcard. When they came back, tan and smiling, they showed me photos, expensive dinners, beaches, sunsets. I had paid for it all. Marcus hugged me casually. Thanks again, Mom. We knew you'd want Skylar to have that experience. That night, scrolling through their social media posts, I stared at the smiling faces, the cocktails, the captions, family time is everything. My heart didn't break this time. It hardened. That was the moment something shifted permanently. I stopped waiting for gratitude. I stopped hoping for love. And in the quiet that followed, a new kind of voice emerged inside me, small at first, but growing stronger each day. It whispered things I hadn't dared to think before. What if you stopped helping them? What if you took back your life? What if you finally made them see what they've done? For weeks, I pushed that voice away. I told myself revenge wasn't the answer. I told myself mothers forgive. But forgiveness means nothing when the wound never heals. And then came the birthday party. The grape juice. The laughter. The final insult that turned quiet resentment into resolve. They thought I'd just take it again, that I'd clean up and show up next Sunday like nothing had happened. But they were wrong. That night, in my car, when I looked in the mirror and saw that calm, determined woman staring back at me, I made a silent promise. I would no longer be the victim in their story. The next morning, I woke with purpose. I opened my drawer and pulled out the old metal box where I kept every document, the bank statements, the receipts, the co-signer contracts, the wire transfers. Years of evidence, each one stamped with the same story. I saved them, again and again. It was time to save myself. The morning I decided to change everything was strangely peaceful. No storm, no thunder. Just sunlight slipping through the blinds and the hum of the fridge filling the silence. I made coffee and sat at my little kitchen table, the same one Robert and I had bought 40 years ago at a yard sale. The wood was scratched and faded, but solid, like me. I laid out every document I had kept over the years, bank statements, receipts, contracts, and letters. The story of my humiliation was printed in black and white. Each number, each date, each payment was a memory of a time I'd believed love could be bought. $43,000. That's how much I had spent on my family. Not counting the sleepless nights, the tears, or the years I'd lost believing their affection was still within reach. I picked up my phone and dialed the first number. Good morning, Attorney Jenkins, I said. My voice sounded steadier than it had in years. This is Estelle Dree. I need your help with a family matter. Silas Jenkins had handled my husband's will after Robert died. He was in his 70s now, but still sharp as a blade. Of course, Estelle, he said, surprised but kind. What's going on? I want to remove my name from my son's mortgage. The one I co-signed 6 years ago. There was a pause on the line. I could almost hear him sitting back in his chair. Estelle, are you sure you want to do that? If you withdraw, the bank may demand immediate payment or foreclose. I know, I said quietly. That's exactly what I want. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, in a softer tone, I see. I explained briefly what had happened, the birthday party, the years of loans, the disrespect. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just laid out the facts like numbers on a ledger. Come to my office at 3 this afternoon, he said. We'll review everything. When I hung up, I didn't feel guilt. I felt light. I poured myself another cup of coffee and dialed the second number, the bank. After several transfers and automated menus, a familiar voice answered. Mr. Sterling, I said. It's Estelle Dree. I'd like to discuss the mortgage for the property on Elmwood Avenue. He hesitated. Of course, Ms. Dree. Is there an issue? The account is current this month. There's no issue, I replied calmly. I simply want to explore the process of withdrawing as a co-signer. There was silence. Then, confusion. You want to remove your name? Yes. Could you please send me the documentation to begin that process? Well, technically it's possible, he began slowly, but it would require the other borrowers, your son and daughter-in-law, to qualify for the loan on their own. If they can't, the bank would have the right to demand the full balance. I understand. What's the remaining balance? He flipped through papers. Approximately $137,000. The number didn't scare me. It grounded me. Please email me the statement and necessary forms, I said. After I hung up, I just sat there for a while, listening to the ticking clock. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped. That afternoon, I met Silas in his office. The man hadn't changed much. Same thick glasses, same deep voice that carried a certain authority. His office smelled like leather and old books. I've reviewed your documents, he said. You've got everything in order. Legally, you're within your rights to request removal, though it'll likely trigger foreclosure if they can't refinance. That's fine, I said. He looked up from his papers. You're calm about this. I smiled faintly. Mr. Jenkins, I've already paid for peace once. This time, I'm just claiming it. He nodded, signing a few forms. I'll handle the communication with the bank. You'll need to confirm by phone when they contact you. Thank you, I said, shaking his hand. As I walked out of his office into the afternoon sun, a breeze lifted my hair, and I felt something I hadn't in years, control. That night, I slept deeply, without dreams. 3 weeks later, my phone rang at 6:04 a.m. Marcus. I knew before answering what it was about. Mom, he said, voice trembling. We just got a letter from the bank. It says you're withdrawing your co-signature. This has to be a mistake, right? It's not a mistake, I said. There was silence. Then, panic. Mom, you can't do this. We'll lose the house. Skylar. Marcus, I interrupted softly. I know exactly what this means. Is this because of what happened at the party? He snapped. That was just a kid's prank, for God's sake. I took a deep breath. This isn't about grape juice, Marcus. It's about 6 years of being treated like a stranger in a house I helped pay for. It's about being your safety net, your bank, your silent shame. Mom. It's about the fact that you let your daughter humiliate me in front of strangers, and didn't say a word. His voice cracked. You're going to ruin our lives over some misunderstanding. No, I said quietly. I'm just stepping out of the role you cast me in. I could hear Tanisha in the background, shouting about lawyers, about how I couldn't legally do this, how they'd fight it. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. Marcus, I said finally, 4 years, I kept paying to keep your world standing. But I realized something, the more I gave, the smaller I became. I won't live small anymore. He was silent. Then, quietly, Mom, please. We'll figure this out. But I'd already made my decision. I hope you do, I said. Because this time, you'll have to figure it out without me. I hung up before he could answer. My hands were steady. My heart was not racing. Just steady. Later that day, I drove to the Lake Robert, and I used to visit when we were young. The trees were bare, the air crisp. I sat on a bench by the water, watching the ripples move across the surface. I thought about my life, the girl I'd been at 20, the wife I'd been at 40, the mother at 60. Always giving, always fixing, always waiting. It struck me how quiet freedom feels. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a slow, deep exhale that fills your lungs after years of holding your breath. I took off my wedding ring, the one I had never removed, even after Robert's death, and slipped it into my coat pocket. I did my best, I whispered to the water. And now it's time to do better for me. When I drove home that evening, I passed Marcus's house. The porch light was on, and through the window I could see movement, silhouettes, frantic gestures, the chaos of panic. For once, it wasn't my problem to fix. I parked in front of my apartment and turned off the car. The silence wrapped around me like a soft blanket. It wasn't revenge I felt. It wasn't satisfaction. It was something quieter. Justice, maybe. Or simply balance returning after years of imbalance. And underneath it all, one thought pulsed steady and strong. They'll finally learn what life feels like without me holding it up. The phone didn't stop ringing for days. Marcus called every morning, sometimes twice before noon. When I didn't answer, he left long, desperate voicemails that began with anger and ended in pleading. Mom, you don't understand how serious this is. Mom, the bank's threatening foreclosure. Mom, please. Skylar's crying. You can't do this to us. Each time, I pressed delete. Then came Tanisha's messages, sharper, colder. You're destroying your own family. Everyone's talking about what you did. Do you really want people to think you abandoned your granddaughter? At first, her words stung. But by the 5th voicemail, they didn't anymore. They just sounded like static, the same old manipulation dressed up as concern. It had been 3 weeks since I withdrew my name from their mortgage. The bank had already sent the notice. Without a new co-signer or proof of income, Marcus and Tanisha had 60 days to refinance, or the house would be repossessed. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one scrambling to fix things. The quiet was strange. Too big. Too heavy. The first few nights, I woke up automatically at 3 a.m., expecting the phone to ring with another emergency. But the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator, and the faint creak of the building settling. I began to realize something I hadn't wanted to face before. Peace can be terrifying when you've lived your whole life in chaos. On the 4th night, I sat at my kitchen table again, the documents now neatly filed away. I poured myself a glass of wine, something I hadn't done in years. Robert never drank, and after he passed, it felt wrong to do it alone. But that night, I poured it anyway. To survival, I whispered, raising the glass. It wasn't a toast to revenge. It was to endurance, to the years I'd survived on crumbs of affection, and still found ways to love. The next morning, I got a letter in the mail. It was handwritten. The return address said Marcus and Tanisha. I almost threw it away. But curiosity won. Inside was a single page of lined paper. Marcus's handwriting, hurried and messy. Mom. I don't know what to say. I'm angry. Tanisha's angry. But mostly, I'm scared. We might lose the house. I know you think we used you, but it wasn't like that. You were the only one we could depend on. Maybe we took advantage of that, I don't know. I didn't think you'd actually cut us off. Skylar keeps asking why you're mad. I don't know what to tell her. Please call me. Marcus. I folded the letter carefully and set it aside. My first instinct was guilt, that familiar ache in my stomach that whispered I'd gone too far. But then I remembered Skylar's smirk at the party, the laughter, the stain on my dress. And I realized something important. Marcus wasn't scared of losing me. He was scared of losing my money. There's a difference between remorse and panic. And I could hear it in every line of that letter. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about Skylar. She was only a child, and children repeat what they're taught. Maybe someday she'd understand. Maybe she wouldn't. But it wasn't my job to fix her mother's poison. The next weekend, I went to the farmer's market for the first time in years. The morning air was cool and sweet, full of chatter and the smell of fresh bread. I bought sunflowers and a slice of peach pie, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to rush home to cook for someone else. A woman around my age was selling handmade scarves. She smiled as I touched one, deep purple, soft as silk. That color suits you, she said kindly. I almost laughed. Purple. The color of that cursed grape juice. But instead of bitterness, I felt something lighter, irony, maybe. I bought the scarf and wore it out of the store, letting it flutter behind me like a small rebellion. When I got home, I put on some music, old jazz records Robert used to love, and started cleaning. The apartment was small, but it was mine. Every corner carried my touch, every item placed with care. There was no mess to fix but my own. That evening, I cooked myself a real dinner, baked salmon, roasted vegetables, and a small glass of white wine. I lit a candle. I even set the table. For years, I had cooked meals that went unappreciated. Now, I ate alone, and it felt sacred. 2 weeks later, Marcus showed up at my door. He didn't call first. Just knocked, loud and frantic. When I opened it, he looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, his shirt wrinkled. Tanisha wasn't with him. Mom, he said, breathless. We need to talk. I hesitated but stepped aside. He stood in the middle of my small living room, looking around like he hadn't really seen it before. Maybe he hadn't. My space wasn't grand, but it was warm, floral curtains, family photos, the smell of lavender. Mom, the bank, they won't extend the deadline. We can't refinance without you. I know, I said quietly. They're going to take the house. I nodded. Then you'll find another one. His mouth dropped open. You can't be serious. Marcus, I said softly, for 6 years, I kept you from facing consequences. Maybe it's time you learn what standing on your own feels like. He sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. I never thought you'd do this to me. I didn't do this to you, I said gently. I did this for me. He looked at me then, really looked. Maybe for the first time in his adult life. There was confusion in his eyes, and a trace of shame, too. You don't understand, he said quietly. We're family. I smiled sadly. Family isn't a word you use when you need something. It's a bond you honor even when you don't. He sat there for a long time, saying nothing. Then he stood and walked to the door. Goodbye, Mom, he said, voice cracking. Goodbye, Marcus. When the door closed, I exhaled. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From release. That night, I dreamed of Robert. He was standing in the garden, trimming the roses like he used to, smiling that soft, patient smile of his. You finally did it, he said. I think I did, I whispered. He nodded. About time. I woke up with tears on my face, but they weren't sad tears. They were the kind that come when you finally forgive yourself. I made coffee, wrapped the purple scarf around my shoulders, and stepped outside. The morning sun was rising, soft and gold. I didn't know what would happen next, if Marcus would ever speak to me again, if Skylar would remember me kindly, if Tanisha would keep her grudge forever. But I knew this. I had survived the worst version of love, the kind that hurts more than it heals. Now, I was learning the purest kind, the kind that begins with yourself. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. It happened on a Thursday. The letter from the bank arrived at noon, official, cold, and final. I sat at my kitchen table, sunlight falling across the papers, as I read the words I already knew were coming: notice of foreclosure. Property on Elmwood Avenue will be repossessed within 30 days. I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I just folded the letter neatly and placed it on the counter beside my cup of tea. For years, I had lived in fear of that very sentence. The idea of losing the house had haunted me, as if it were my own skin, my own identity. But as I sat there in my little apartment, I realized something almost funny. That house had never been my home. It had been my prison. The phone rang within minutes. Marcus. Again. This time, I answered. Mom, it's done. They're taking the house. His voice cracked. Do you feel better now? Are you happy? No, I said softly. But I'm free. There was silence. I could hear his breath catch. I don't know where we'll go, he said. Skylar's devastated. Tanisha won't even talk to me. You'll figure it out, I said gently. You're stronger than you think. I don't feel strong. Neither did I replied. Until I had to be. He was quiet again. Then, in a low voice that sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. I'm sorry, Mom. My heart thudded once, hard and heavy. Those were the words I'd waited years to hear. But when they finally came, they didn't heal anything. They just landed softly, like snow. Late, but not unwelcome. I know, I said. I hope someday you mean it. He didn't argue. He just whispered goodbye, and the line went dead. That night, I walked outside, the air crisp and clear. The neighborhood was quiet, the hum of distant traffic, a dog barking somewhere down the block, the faint smell of rain. I wrapped my purple scarf tighter, and walked toward the park at the end of the street. The sky was wide and full of stars. I sat on a bench beneath the old oak tree, the same spot where Robert and I used to sit decades ago, back when dreams still felt endless. I closed my eyes and breathed. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. It was a strange feeling, this peace. Not loud or triumphant. Just soft. Solid. Real. The weeks passed quietly after that. I filled my days with small things that had nothing to do with anyone else: morning walks, crossword puzzles, volunteering at the library on Thursdays. I even started painting again. I'd forgotten how much I loved the feeling of a brush gliding across a canvas. One afternoon, while I was painting a small vase of lilacs, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, I froze. Skylar stood there. She was clutching a small box, her curls tied up in a pink ribbon, her eyes uncertain. She looked older somehow, not in years, but in understanding. "Grandma," she said quietly. "Mom said I shouldn't come. But I wanted to. My heart ached." "You can always come, sweetheart." She handed me the box. Inside was a folded napkin, my napkin. The one from her birthday party, stained faintly purple. "I found it in the drawer," she said. "I cleaned it. I'm sorry I threw the juice." Her voice trembled. For a second, I saw not Tanisha's child, not the echo of cruelty, but a little girl who was finally learning how to be kind. I knelt down and hugged her tightly. "It's okay, baby," I whispered. "You didn't know." She smelled like vanilla shampoo and crayons, innocence and beginnings. When I pulled back, she smiled shyly. "Daddy said you're painting again." "I am." "Can I see?" "Of course." We went inside, and she stood in front of my easel, tilting her head. "It's pretty," she said. "But it needs more purple." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like years. "Maybe you're right," I said. "Purple's your color, after all." After she left, the apartment felt different, warmer somehow. The kind of warmth that doesn't come from forgiveness, but from acceptance. That night, I sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker. I thought about Marcus, where he might be, how he was managing. I didn't feel anger anymore. Just distance. A kind of love that had changed shape, quieter, safer. I wrote him a short letter before bed. "Marcus, I hope you and Skylar are okay. I don't wish you harm. I just needed peace, and I hope someday you understand why. I'll always love you, but from a place that doesn't hurt anymore. Mom." I didn't know if I'd ever send it. Maybe it wasn't for him. Maybe it was for me. A month later, I drove past Elmwood Avenue out of curiosity. The house was empty, blinds drawn, grass overgrown. A "for sale" sign stood crooked in the yard. For years, that house had been the center of my world, the symbol of everything I thought love was supposed to be. Now it looked small. Soulless. Just bricks and wood. I parked for a moment, watching the wind move through the trees. The silence didn't hurt this time. It just was. As I drove away, I whispered goodbye under my breath, not to the house, but to the version of myself who had lived for everyone but herself. These days, mornings are my favorite time. I wake up early, make coffee, and open the windows wide. Sometimes, I sit on the balcony with my journal, writing little things that make me smile: the smell of rain, the laughter from the neighbors, the way sunlight touches the floor just right. Freedom doesn't look like I thought it would. It's quieter. Smaller. But it's mine. Last week, I painted something new, a field of lavender under a violet sky. I called it resilience. I'm not sure why. Maybe because it feels like what I became. When I finished, I signed it with my full name, Estelle Dree. Not Mom. Not Grandma. Not Mrs. Dupree. Just me. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. Sometimes, when I pass by the mirror, I catch my reflection and barely recognize the woman staring back, Not because she's changed on the outside, but because she finally looks like someone who knows her own worth. I touch the edge of the purple scarf that still hangs over my chair, the one I bought at the market that day, and smile. That color used to remind me of humiliation. Now, it reminds me of healing. I lift it gently and whisper to the empty room, "You did it, Essie. You finally did it." The silence answers me softly, like a friend. And for the first time in my 64 years, I believe it.